How were these four truths concretized in the life of Bishop Jim and Brother Joe, and through them transmitted to the lives of others? I'm going to begin with Brother Joe, although he was the younger of the two, because he was the first to confront me with the radical implications of what it really means to be in Jesus Christ. It was my first day in seminary as a freshman at Perkins School of Theology in Dallas. I was in a class full of other freshmen, and we were all waiting with anticipation for the arrival of the controversial Professor Joseph Wesley Matthews. We'd all heard about him, but none of us really knew what to expect. Finally, he came in and just stood at the front of the class for a long time, looking us over. Then he said, "Before you came through that door, I knew more about each one of you than you would want your mother to know." Now, what did he know about us? Truth be told, he didn't know anything about us. He didn't know squat about us. Except Joseph Wesley Matthews knew himself, and he knew that the demons with which he struggled in the deeps of his own consciousness were not all that different from the demons with which we all struggle in the deeps of our consciousnesses. And so we talked. And he talked about how the implications of the gospel were for every person in that room, and I listened, and from that time on began to rethink what I wanted my life to be all about. After a while, Brother Joe had an opportunity to work in a venue larger than a denominational seminary. He left Perkins School of Theology to become the Dean of Curriculum at the Christian Faith and Life Community in Austin, Texas. After traveling around the world to learn about various religious orders, he returned to Austin to form a disciplined religious cadre, which was the forerunner of the order ecumenical. Religious Studies 1, RS1, came into being. Pedagogues were trained. RS1 began to spread first throughout the Southwest, then throughout the nation, and as you know, eventually throughout the world. There was the move to Chicago, with the complete renewal and reconstruction of a ghetto on the west side, known as Fifth City, the mother model, replicated in the 24 time zones of the world. The Order Ecumenical created religious houses in different cities throughout the United States, including Atlanta. I think of it because I see my friend Lon Chestnut here this morning. Lon was a member of the first order that created the religious house in Atlanta. Over time, the Order Ecumenical morphed into the Institute for Cultural Affairs, the ICA. At the time of Joe's death in 1977, the ICA was established in 47 countries and operated by an international community of families consisting of over 2,000 families bonded in an experimental, secular religious order. This order has also been the core of a movement of over 100,000 colleagues, including an awful lot of folks in this symposium across the world. Over 100,000 colleagues. By 1982, over 50 international training institutes for laity and clergy had graduated a new generation of ecumenical leadership in Latin America, Africa, Asia, India, Australia, and Europe. Those leaders have been the catalyst for an explosion of self-help developments and projects in 43 nations. Meanwhile, the Chicago ICA staff has operated the International Conference Center and Community Resource Center serving over 1,000 clients per week as the largest one-stop social center in the nation. The long march of renewing the world has begun. As far as Bishop Jim is concerned, Bishop, may I talk about you for just a minute? Incarnating the values that I've suggested meant primarily advancing the renewal of the church from within the institution. And he didn't hesitate to use the appointment process to that end. That's how he turned my life and the life of our family inside out and upside down. Having spent half of my 46 years in ministry in the state of Texas, toward the end of that time in Texas, I found myself finally being appointed to a church I had always dreamed of serving, and that was a University Methodist church right on the edge of the campus of the University of Texas, which then had 40,000 students. It was a town and gown congregation and just a place of great vitality and challenge. Nancy was state vice president for the League of Women Voters and was heading up their lobbying corps at the state capitol. Our sons, Will and Chris, and Will is here today. Chris planned to be, but came down with a bad back. They were both stars on the high school basketball team, with Will planning to enter a Texas college, and Chris looking forward to a glorious senior high school year. I was in my mid-40s and already fantasizing about how I could retire in Shangri-La. Then came the phone call from Bishop Jim. It was not a mandate. He didn't try and overwhelm me with his Episcopal authority. He issued an invitation, an opportunity, which I interpreted as a claim I could not ignore. He talked about his missional vision for the national church of our denomination, a church located across from the campus of the American University and attended by a number of U.S. senators and congressmen at that time, and a soon to become a congregation member, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Harry A. Blackman. Most of all, he talked about the potential power of that church's pulpit and what it could mean to have a preacher stand in that pulpit and lobby for the gospel and cry, "Thus saith the Lord." Well, we had a family conference, and after a genuine consensus, the four of us decided to set out on a new adventure. We moved to Washington, D.C., and for the next 24 years, I preached from that pulpit, trained pedagogues, and conducted RS1 retreats 3 or 4 times a year for members of the congregation and for other churches. All because Bishop Jim defined the appointment process in terms of a compelling mission. At the same time, however, he never hesitated to creatively exploit opportunities outside the church to influence secular power, taking full advantage of conferences with Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and with presidents John F. Kennedy, George H.W. Bush, William Jefferson Clinton, and with Associate Supreme Court Justice Harry A. Blackman, and a number of other national and world figures. His vision was always global, but his praxis was always local. whether applied in settings secular or ecclesiastical. On Easter Sunday, 1964, he and Bishop Charles F. Golden, one of Methodism's first African-American bishops, attempted to worship and thereby integrate Galloway Memorial Methodist Church in Jackson, Mississippi. But they were turned away. This denial of access to Methodist bishops trying to worship and celebrate the resurrection on Easter Sunday at a Methodist church ricocheted throughout the denomination and considerably advanced the cause of civil and religious rights. In each of the Episcopal areas that he served, Bishop Jim instituted study days for all his clergy, and he did the teaching himself. I know I was there for some of that. It was R.S. Woman. While presiding over the greater Washington area through the appointment process, he considerably advanced the cause of inclusiveness for African Americans, for women, and for various racial minorities. In 1978, Native Americans dramatized their plight in what they called the longest walk from California to Washington, D.C. Bishop Jim not only welcomed them and joined them in their walk into the nation's capital, he arranged for them to stay in churches, raised $75,000 toward their walk, and interceded for them with the FBI and the National Park Service to allow the pitching of teepees on the mall. While in Washington, he agreed to chair the Board of Trustees at American University, organized the Interfaith Conference of Washington, which is today the most widely representative body of different faiths in the United States. And he instituted the Church's Center for Theology and Public Policy, with its innumerable contributions to some of the Church's most prophetic actions, including the Council of Bishops' document in defense of creation, backing nuclear arms control. The list stretches far beyond the time allotted for this presentation, but suffice it to say that although the discipline of the denomination required Bishop Jim to retire at a certain age, the Council of Bishops called him out of that retirement time and time again. He is the personification of worldwide mission, history long, a mission which has always been for him a willing life sentence. Now, let me move to the other part of my assignment and say a word about the claim of the Matthews legacy in our time, with examples of where building the earth is happening today, since I can't channel either of the brothers. This is my own subjective list of renewal efforts, some secular, some ecclesiastical, and some a little of both, including, I must add, organizations to which I've been introduced by members of my own family. And as before, I'm certain most of you, given the chance, could offer comparable accounts. I don't take for granted the privilege I have of standing up here today to say these things. On the semi-secular side, I state the obvious by affirming how international training institutes and human development projects are succeeding in renewing the world. Although having never directly participated in these efforts, I know the evidence is overwhelming that they continue to provide some of the most comprehensive and compelling models for renewing the world.